Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of What Happened. Today, we're diving into one of the most remarkable political comebacks in recent history, a story that has everything you'd want in a political thriller: exile and return, revolution and democracy, dynastic politics, and youth uprising. This is the story of how a man who fled his homeland 17 years ago just returned to win one of the biggest electoral landslides in Bangladesh's history. But this isn't just about one person's journey from exile to power. It's about an entire nation's struggle to break free from authoritarianism, about how a student-led revolution changed the course of South Asian politics, and about what happens when the old guard falls and democracy gets a second chance. So buckle up, because what happened in Bangladesh on February 12, 2026 is going to reshape the politics of one of the world's most populous countries for decades to come. To understand the magnitude of what just happened in Bangladesh, we need to go back to August 2024. Picture this: a country of 175 million people, ruled for 15 years by Sheikh Hasina, a woman who had become synonymous with Bangladeshi politics. Her Awami League party had won 4 consecutive elections, but by 2024, cracks were showing everywhere. It started with students. In June 2024, university students across Bangladesh began protesting against the quota system for government jobs. What seemed like a straightforward demand for reform quickly escalated into something much bigger. The students weren't just upset about job quotas, they were fed up with corruption, economic stagnation, and increasingly authoritarian rule. Sheikh Hasina's response was brutal. Security forces and paramilitary units cracked down hard on the protesters in what became known as the July Massacre. But instead of crushing the movement, the violent response only fueled it. By August, what had started as student protests had become a nationwide uprising. The end came swiftly. On August 5, 2024, after months of escalating protests and with the military refusing to support her, Sheikh Hasina fled Bangladesh in a helicopter, seeking refuge in India. Her 15-year rule was over, and Bangladesh was about to embark on a completely different political path. An interim government was established, led by Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus. The 85-year-old economist, famous for his work in microfinance, became the face of Bangladesh's transition to democracy. But everyone knew this was temporary. The real question was what would come next. Enter Tarique Rahman, a man whose life reads like a political thriller. Born in 1965 to one of Bangladesh's most powerful political families, Rahman grew up watching his country's turbulent politics from the inside. His father, Ziaur Rahman, was a war hero who became president but was assassinated in 1981 when Tarique was just 15. His mother, Khaleda Zia, went on to serve as prime minister twice and became one of the most powerful women in South Asian politics. But by 2008, being a Rahman in Bangladesh had become dangerous. When the military-backed caretaker government began cracking down on political corruption, Tarique found himself in the crosshairs. Facing what he described as politically motivated persecution, he made a decision that would define the next chapter of his life. He fled to London. For 17 years, Tarique Rahman lived in exile in the United Kingdom. While his mother and the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the political movement founded by his father, struggled under increasingly authoritarian rule back home, Rahman was building a different kind of life. He studied, he reflected, and according to those who knew him, he evolved from what critics had called a brash operator into someone with a more sophisticated understanding of governance and democracy. During his exile, Rahman watched from afar as Sheikh Hasina consolidated power. His mother, Khaleda Zia, was imprisoned on corruption charges. The BNP was systematically weakened, its leaders arrested, its activities restricted. In the 2018 election, the BNP won just 7 seats, its worst performance in history. Many wrote off the party as finished. But exile also gave Rahman something valuable: perspective. Away from the immediate pressures of Bangladeshi politics, he had time to think about what kind of leader he wanted to be and what kind of country Bangladesh could become. When the student uprising began in 2024, Rahman was watching, waiting, and preparing. In December 2025, just 2 months before the election, Tarique Rahman made his dramatic return to Bangladesh. The man who stepped off the plane in Dhaka was different from the one who had left. Gone was the image of the brash political operator. In its place was someone who spoke about unity, reconciliation, and democratic values. The timing of his return was perfect. With Sheikh Hasina in exile and the Awami League banned from participating in the upcoming election, there was a political vacuum in Bangladesh. The BNP, led by Rahman, was perfectly positioned to fill it. But Rahman wasn't the only one with political ambitions. The election was set up as a contest between two major alliances. Rahman's Bangladesh Nationalist Party leading a coalition of center-right parties, and Jamaat-e-Islami, the Islamist party that was leading its own 11-party alliance. Jamaat-e-Islami had its own remarkable comeback story. The party had been banned for years, accused of war crimes during Bangladesh's 1971 independence war. But with Hasina gone and political space opening up, Jamaat was back and confident. Led by 67-year-old Ziaur Rahman, they believed they could capitalize on religious sentiment and anti-Awami League feelings to win power. The third major player was the National Citizen Party, formed by the very students who had led the uprising against Hasina. These young activists believed they could translate their revolutionary energy into electoral success. They represented a new generation of Bangladeshi politics, untainted by the dynastical conflicts that had dominated the country for decades. As the election approached, the stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about choosing a government. It was about defining what kind of country Bangladesh would become. Would it embrace the democratic aspirations of the student revolutionaries? Would it turn toward religious politics with Jamaat? Or would it return to the familiar dynamics of dynastic politics with Rahman's BNP? The campaign was unlike anything Bangladesh had seen in years. For the first time since 2008, there was genuine competition. Candidates could speak freely, parties could organize rallies, and voters had real choices. Rahman drew massive crowds as he traveled across the country, speaking about economic revival, job creation, and national unity. His message was carefully crafted for a country exhausted by conflict. Rather than attacking his opponents or dwelling on past grievances, Rahman spoke about moving forward together. He promised economic reforms, including financial aid for poor families and a constitutional amendment limiting prime ministers to 10 years in office, a direct response to concerns about the authoritarianism that had characterized Hasina's rule. The election itself, held on February 12, 2026, was a massive undertaking. Nearly 127 million people were eligible to vote across more than 42,000 polling stations. International observers called it one of the most credible elections in Bangladesh's recent history, with a turnout of nearly 60%. But voters weren't just choosing a parliament. In a parallel referendum, they were also voting on the July Charter, a package of constitutional reforms designed to prevent a return to authoritarian rule. These reforms included term limits for prime ministers, stronger judicial independence, and better representation for women. As the votes were counted through the night, one thing became clear very quickly. This was going to be a landslide. The BNP wasn't just winning, it was dominating. Final results showed Rahman's coalition winning 212 out of 299 parliamentary seats, giving them a commanding two-thirds majority. Jamaat-e-Islami, despite their confidence, managed only 77 seats. The National Citizen Party, representing the student revolutionaries who had made the election possible, won just 6 seats, a disappointing result that highlighted the difference between leading a revolution and winning an election. The scale of the BNP's victory was stunning. They won seats in every region of the country, including in areas that had traditionally been Awami League strongholds. In Gopalganj, Sheikh Hasina's home district, the BNP swept all 3 parliamentary seats for the first time since 1996. Rahman's victory speech was characteristically gracious. "Our paths and opinions may differ, but in the interest of the country, we must remain united," he said. Rather than organizing victory rallies, the BNP asked supporters to pray for the country at mosques, temples, churches, and pagodas across Bangladesh. The international reaction was swift and significant. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi personally called Rahman to congratulate him. Despite the complex history between India and the BNP, Pakistan's leadership also reached out, as did leaders from across South Asia and beyond. The United States, through Secretary of State Marco Rubio, expressed its readiness to work with the new government. But perhaps the most telling response came from Sheikh Hasina herself, still in exile in India. In a statement released after the election, she denounced the results as a carefully planned farce and demanded the election be cancelled. Her rejection of the democratic process she had once claimed to champion highlighted just how much Bangladesh had changed. The constitutional referendum was also successful, with 48 million voters approving the July charter reforms. This means Rahman will govern under new constraints designed to prevent the concentration of power that characterized previous administrations. So what does this victory mean for Bangladesh and for Rahman himself? First, it's a vindication of his 17-year journey from exile to power. The man who fled his country in 2008 as a controversial figure has returned as a democratically elected leader with an overwhelming mandate. But it's also a massive responsibility. Bangladesh faces enormous challenges: a struggling economy, high unemployment, climate change impacts, and the need to heal divisions created by years of political conflict. Rahman has promised to address these issues, but promises are easier to make than to keep. The victory also raises questions about the future of Bangladeshi democracy. Rahman comes from one of the country's most powerful political dynasties. His father founded the BNP, his mother led it for decades, and now he's taking control. Some worry that despite the democratic trappings, Bangladesh might simply be swapping one form of dynastic politics for another. Rahman seems aware of these concerns. His campaign rhetoric consistently emphasized democratic values, constitutional governance, and the importance of institutions over personalities. Whether he can live up to these promises remains to be seen. The election also has significant regional implications. Bangladesh sits at the crossroads of South and Southeast Asia, bordering India and Myanmar. Its relationships with these neighbors, particularly India, were strained during the final years of Hasina's rule. Rahman has signaled his intention to reset these relationships, pursuing what he calls a balanced foreign policy that doesn't favor any single power. This is particularly important given the growing competition between India and China for influence in South Asia. Hasina had maintained close ties with India, but her departure and Rahman's rise could create space for China to expand its influence through initiatives like the Belt and Road Project. For the students who led the revolution that made this election possible, the results are bittersweet. While they succeeded in ending Hasina's authoritarian rule, their own National Citizen Party performed poorly at the polls. This highlights a common pattern in revolutionary movements. Those who lead uprisings often struggle to translate their activism into electoral success. However, their impact on Bangladesh's political system goes far beyond their party's performance. The constitutional reforms they championed were approved by voters, and the democratic space they fought for is now being filled by competing parties and ideas. In many ways, they achieved their broader goal even if they didn't win power themselves. The election also represents a generational shift in South Asian politics. At 60, Rahman is significantly younger than many of the region's established leaders. His victory, combined with similar changes in other South Asian countries, suggests that the region's politics may be entering a new phase. Looking ahead, Rahman faces the enormous challenge of governing a country that has been polarized by years of political conflict. His calls for unity are admirable, but translating them into practical governance will be difficult. He'll need to balance the demands of his own party supporters with the need to represent all Bangladeshis, including those who supported other parties or the exiled Awami League. The economic challenges are particularly daunting. Bangladesh's garment industry, which provides employment for millions and generates crucial export revenue, has been disrupted by political instability. Rahman has promised job creation and economic revival, but delivering on these promises will require more than political will. It will require sound policies and international cooperation. There's also the question of what to do about Sheikh Hasina. The BNP has indicated it will seek her extradition from India to face charges related to the crackdown on protesters. This could complicate Bangladesh's relationship with India and create new sources of tension in the region. But perhaps the most important challenge Rahman faces is proving that Bangladesh can break the cycle of political revenge and authoritarianism that has characterized much of its history. The constitutional reforms approved by voters are designed to prevent any future leader from accumulating the kind of unchecked power that Hasina wielded. Whether these reforms will be effective depends largely on how Rahman chooses to exercise the power voters have given him. What makes this story so compelling is how it demonstrates the unpredictable nature of political change. Just 2 years ago, Sheikh Hasina seemed firmly in control. The BNP appeared finished, and Tarique Rahman was a forgotten exile in London. Today, Rahman is preparing to become prime minister with one of the largest electoral mandates in Bangladesh's history. It's also a reminder of the power of democratic movements to create change. The students who took to the streets in 2024 may not have won many seats in parliament, but they fundamentally altered their country's political trajectory. Their courage in standing up to authoritarian rule created the space for democratic competition to flourish. The Bangladesh election of 2026 will be remembered as one of the most significant moments in the country's political history. It marked the end of Sheikh Hasina's long dominance, the return of competitive democracy, and the beginning of a new chapter under Tarique Rahman's leadership. Whether this new chapter will fulfill the democratic aspirations of the students who made it possible, or whether it will simply represent a changing of the guard within Bangladesh's established political elite, remains to be seen. What's clear is that the eyes of the region and the world will be watching as Rahman attempts to govern a country that has given him an enormous mandate for change. So there you have it, the complete story of how a 17-year exile became a landslide election winner, and how a student revolution ultimately reshaped the politics of one of the world's most populous countries. It's a reminder that in politics, just like in life, the most unexpected stories often turn out to be the most compelling. What do you think about Tarique Rahman's remarkable comeback? Can he successfully lead Bangladesh toward a more democratic future, or are we just seeing the latest chapter in the country's cycle of dynastic politics? How do you think this will affect regional politics in South Asia? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive into one of 2026's most significant political stories compelling, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. There's always more happening in world politics, and I'll be here to break it down for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.